Every year since 1989, the Library of Congress has selected 25 films to add to the National Film Registry. The criteria? The films must be culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant.
Each week on You're Missing Out, we take a look at one of these films to try and get to the heart of why they were selected and why they still matter.
This week, returning guest David Bluvband joins us to discuss the 1955 film noir, The Night of the Hunter.
Our guest today is an actor, writer, and filmmaker. David Bluvband joins us today, comes back on the show to talk about The Night of the Hunter. David, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, fellas. Thanks so much for having me again.
Welcome. And it's not a John Huston movie this time, so we got you to broaden your horizons a bit to a black and white movie from the 50s.
Well, now I've also done an Ernst Lubitsch movie with you guys, and now Charles Laughton's only movie.
Yes, yeah. This is the only time you will be doing a Charles Laughton directed film on this show. I can guarantee it. After today, we're never letting you do a Charles Laughton directed film on this show again.
Well, you know, he's going to be the only person in this show's history that will 100% a filmmaker's filmography.
This is true.
Yeah.
This is true.
Boom. I got
Well,
it.
that's not true. So, you know, we do have the JFK tape coming up
This
soon,
is
so
true.
that'll be
I believe.
But he didn't direct that.
No. Well, I don't know what Zapruder's other filmography was. Imagine we go on IMDb and we find out Abraham Zapruder did like Nightmare on Elm Street 5. He's just got
he shot Hot Dog the movie.
Yeah.
Oh.
I feel like Zapruder feels like one of those guys who you could unearth like all these like 5-minute newsreel documentaries that were like made in the 50s or something.
What if he was also the guy that shot the OJ chase?
Yeah.
He's just been Forrest Gumping it through history with a 35mm camera. He's just got all of the tapes.
All right, honey, we're going to Los Angeles today, and that boy in that Bronco is driving real fast. I don't know why he's a Mike Judge character in my mind, but
and who was in Libya that filmed Gaddafi getting killed? Why? It was Abraham Zapruder. It's just all
along.
He's just been in every step of it. But yes, we're so glad to do this, and I have to say, you know, and I think it's fair to say, and I don't want to speak for Tom in any way, but I'm just going to sell him out here. David, you are, I mean, you know, I always love having you on. It's also fair to say you are one of Tom's favorite guests on this show, and Night of the Hunter is one of his favorite films. So when the text came in, when I texted the group chat to say like, oh, David picked Night of the Hunter, normally if I say, oh, so-and-so picked something or something like that, Tom writes back his usual, okay, because he's playing a video game or something. But I believe
haven't played a video game in like 3 months, buddy. Shut the fuck up.
I believe the response this particular David picked Night of the Hunter. The response elicited was hell yeah. Is that correct, Tom? Is that
yeah, that's correct.
So,
this is such a big moment for me because I have the tattoos.
Whoa.
I heavy metal them up a little bit, but yeah. Ever since I saw this movie, I was like, fuck, I gotta get those tattoos.
That's terrifying.
I know, right? I had that realization because it's been a while since I rewatched it, but rewatching it the other day, I was like, a little weird that I decided to get the tattoo of the weird delusional preacher who likes to hunt children and kill widows for money, and who only when he gets erections has to pull out a knife and kill somebody. And like, that's odd. It's a little weird.
I'm just even Radio Raheem got brass knuckles of them, so he could take them off.
But it's like Radio. It's like that's the thing. You're only out is you're like, okay, there's only one other character in fiction who has like the love-hate going on with Radio Raheem. But if somebody turns around and goes, why did you get that? And you say, remember Radio Raheem? You're not going to get any better reception to that.
Well,
people are also going to be confused and concerned.
Yeah, they're gonna be like, "Oh, what? You're trying to cosplay as the giant black guy from Do the Right Thing who gets murdered by the police?" Yeah, that's normal.
Yeah,
I mean, nothing about me is normal.
There's no
I get
good
it. But
answer is the thing. But nevertheless, so we're really excited to have you on for this one. This is one of those, and I'm sure the listeners are going to be stoked for this too, because this just feels like a perfect, A perfect lineup there. Though, we'd happily have you on for any topic because you.
Tom, I want to ask. When was the first time you saw this movie?
Not. I mean, it's not hard to specifically to nail down. It definitely wasn't when I was a kid. It must have been
Okay.
late college, maybe a little after college. It's definitely been at least 10 years since I saw it for the first time because I picked it up at one of the Criterion sales when it was a Blu-ray. So it wasn't like 2006 or whatever. It must have been like I had a job and I had, so I probably saw it around a little after college or even late college, something like that. But around that early to mid 20s age range. And yeah, I mean, that movie, when I first saw it, like I said, I guess my first thought was, fuck, I got to get those tattoos because I need to, for the rest of my days, commemorate this movie, until the inevitable, Tom, we have to take your fingers off because of the diabetes. But I loved it. I mean, the easy thing is, the visuals are so arresting that I like, even if I didn't connect with anything else in the movie, I would love it. But you've got Mitchum in his best performance. I mean, I think by far. You've got this great. It's a weird movie that's like a fairy tale and a biblical, story, like wrapped in one into this like kind of gritty, dirty, kind of realistic crime movie.
Right.
And just like all of this, like all the stuff about the religious criticism and stuff like that I was really into. The small, kind of attacking small town thinking. All of that stuff was just so, like, it was just like a lightning bolt, right? Like right to the head of just like, fuck, yes, this is, I don't want to say this is the movie that unlocked older black, like pre-70s cinema for me, but Mike can attest, I was that kind of kid in college where it's like, oh, it's 70s and beyond, man. I don't go beyond the 70s, bro. Like 70s was real cinema. I was branch out a little bit, but this was kind of the movie that was just, oh shit, there's like this whole just world of crazy older black and white movies that we either don't talk about anymore or don't get talked about or, lost to the, fray. So yeah, this movie is really, really important to me. So important that since I have the tattoos, I can't wait for them to make Night of the Hunter Afterlife.
This was his Switchblade. His Switchblade.
That's what they would do.
Well, no, it would have to be the complete opposite tonally of what Night of the Hunter is. So it would almost have to be a Pink Panther movie.
My aunt used to hide. My aunt said they hid money in her doll. We found the doll right here. I mean, it's funny, Tom, you mentioned seeing it later. And then I'd love to, David, hear when you first saw it. For me, I actually did see it when I was young for a weird roundabout way. I mean, I watched a lot of old movies when I was young. My grandfather was a New York City police officer for many years, right? And a lot of that, he was a guy that got sent to like when they were filming things in New York, right?
Oh, okay.
And he would occasionally like, or working at theater shows, things like that.
I see.
Just like kind of working the sets. And I mean, his favorite story that he told all the time was, I don't remember what it was because he was young, but I think Andy Griffith was in he was a younger cop at the time, and Andy Griffith was in New York, I think doing a play or something like that. He might have been doing something, and he's talking to my grandfather, and just like, because especially in those days, like, especially guys like they would just hang out with the beat cop that was guarding it and talking. He's talking to my grandfather, and he just casually mentions to my grandfather, like, yeah, I might be doing something for television. Like just very casually mentioning, like, this is a thing we're doing or whatever. Because it was like, it came up because he's like, well, I'll be playing a cop and I'll be doing all these things. Blah, 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 blah.
Oh, wow.
Anyway, one of the people he met, and I don't remember when in his career it was Robert Mitchum. Right?
Okay.
And my grandfather, very conservative, straight-laced guy, would often tell little child me, like, listen, sure, he was a pothead, but he was just a terrific guy. What a great... Like, he always spoke highly of Robert Mitchum. So I wanted to watch a Robert Mitchum movie.
Okay.
Right? I remember my parents took me to Blockbuster, and they weren't going to rent Cape Fear because
Sure.
they knew
Okay,
that would
yeah.
be scary for a kid.
Yeah, that's a really intense one.
Neither of them had seen Night of the Hunter. My dad had a vague idea, and I believe his assessment was, he's like, yeah, I think it's like Elmer Gantry. Right? His figuring was like, because again, you hear like preach, it is easy to lump Night of the Hunter and Elmer Gantry together. Elmer
Sure.
Gantry's Burt Lancaster, like, I'm a preacher, but I'm kind of
They're both about
corrupt
preachers.
because
They're both about like
Yeah.
hypocritical preachers.
Yeah, they're both criticisms of religion, except Elmer Gantry
Right.
is, his sin is, I like to sleep around and get
Right,
drunk.
right.
I was not at all prepared for a movie that felt like The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. So
Sure,
it kind of, and I was also, I will say this, Tom hates anybody that advocates for VHS. I understand that.
Yeah.
And I think the Criterion restoration they did is beautiful. And I think this movie should be seen as it's intended to be seen. But I am going to say, I would love for you to imagine being 9 years old, maybe, and watching this motherfucker on a grainy VHS in a dark room.
Oh, wow,
you
yeah.
feel like you might have seen a snuff film. Like, it's deeply unsettling. And that's my first memory of this, is just
what
like...
snuff films are you watching
that
look like German expressionistic movies?
Yeah,
no, but I say that because the thing I remember vividly, legitimately, is that you couldn't really make out what was going on in the scene when he kills, we'll get into it later, but the killing of Shelley Winters.
Sure.
Right? And you're just like watching this woman, the silhouette where, like, yes, he's got her lit, but like obviously on that tape, she just looked like there was a glow around her. And you're just waiting for her to slowly die. And she's just accepting it. And that just lodged somewhere in the back of my brain in a deeply upsetting way.
And not as upsetting to me as the idea of watching this movie in the compromised format that is VHS. That is just... imagine if I told you the only way to watch Lawrence of Arabia was on VHS.
I didn't say the only way to watch. What I am saying is, it is when you can't really make it out and it feels like, and it's kind of fuzzy and it's kind of fucked up, and you're 9, it adds a layer of, oh no, am I supposed to be watching this? Is this legal? This is bizarre. And again, especially because my parents were like, yeah, you can watch this. It's just a priest who drinks, I think. So then you're sitting there watching this and going, should I be seeing? You guys aren't sure if I can rent Men in Black. Why is this something I'm allowed to watch? So it definitely left an impression on my brain from a young age, Night of the Hunter. What about you, David? When was your first time seeing it? What was your relationship with this film? Obviously, you picked it, so it must have had an impact.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of I'm struggling to remember when I first saw it too. I feel like it wasn't that long. Like it feels like very recently, either like when the pandemic first started in 2020 or just a little bit before that in like 2019. Like within the last 10 years. It wasn't one of the ones. It wasn't like in my I wish I had seen it when I was discovering old movies for the first time, because I feel like it would have completely blown my mind and like would have affected it probably would have affected a trajectory in my life. It would have been so important, but like it was, because I was so like blown away by it when I saw it as a full-grown adult. I was like, this is incredible. I can't believe this has been hidden from me for so long. Like, yeah, I would say, like, I was so blown away by the lighting and the framing. This, like, silent... You brought up Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, Mike, and just, like... there's all this, like, German expressionist framing in the photography, and, like... And then just... It's also, like, weirdly violent for its time. Like, it's got like just that shot of Shelley Winters in the car, in the sunken car at the bottom of the lake, is so intense for like 1955.
Yeah.
It's
Also,
just
very frankly sexual too.
it's very it's overtly like
I mean, not just every time he gets a hard on, they show his
Right.
knife stick out of his pocket, but like him straight up just like, I'm not going to fuck you on our wedding night. Having sex is just for making babies. Do you want to make babies? Well, and you're just like, whoa, this is fucking crazy for 19. Well, what is 1950? What, 2?
5, I think.
19, yeah, not 55. Like that's. I'm like,
And
that's pretty frank.
That older woman, Icy Spoon, which is a hilarious name, is also like talking about fucking at one point, and just like how it's like it's not a big deal. I kind of just lie there and think of my canning, and her poor husband is just like, what are you doing?
It's such a wild. It's funny, David, when you said you wish you had seen it when you were discovering old movies. I will say, maybe you're better off that you hadn't, if just because there is an element of this movie, which is when you watch Night of the Hunter, right? And it has that German expressionist lighting and all of that. And you're like, oh shit, there's this whole world of like talkie cinema that looks this expressionistic. And then you find out, no, there isn't.
Yeah.
Like it kind of
right.
Like,
yeah.
This is the kind of movie that you watch and it makes you think like, oh, there must be like a ton of movies out there. It's almost like the first time you see the Rocky Horror Picture Show, like if you fuck with that, where you're like, oh, there must be, all these midnight movies. There must be a whole world of them like this. And then you watch all the other midnight movies and go, okay, none of them are really quite like that. Like
this would be like if in 50 years. This would be like if in 50 years you watch Avatar: The Way of Water and go, oh, that must be what all movies back then look like, and then you go see Ant-Man, you go see Ant-Man: Quantumania, and you're just like, oh, no, thank you.
I do. I think like I was pretty much going to say the same thing, Tom. Like there's I'm kind of glad that more movies didn't attempt this, because the ones that did, I feel like didn't do it as well. But there are examples of like I think a lot of when I was watching it this morning again, I was thinking of The Lighthouse and how that's like a pretty fun experimental, but also like it makes sense to me that this movie was not appreciated in its time. Like reading also that it was like panned by critics, which is hilarious.
Oh yeah,
it's always funny reading negative reviews of a movie that's been reassessed and reappraised for its true value and realize that it's actually a masterpiece.
But sometimes you watch the movie and you think of the time and you go, oh yeah, I get it. I get why they hated this.
Yeah. Because nothing like this existed yet. Like it was truly unique and very much experimental for its time, and every move in this is a huge swing. Even the fact that Robert Mitchum, an acknowledged, celebrated bad boy movie star at this time, like a leading man, is playing the villain, and he's the only he's the only person on screen that is like a box office draw.
Yeah.
Like he's the one that like people don't know who Shelley Winters is yet. The other people in the movie are mostly character actors.
Well, except it does feature the OG movie star, which is the thing that makes it most interesting.
With Lillian Gish, of course.
Which ties into, David, you were saying like nobody had done anything like this before, right? The thing I find fascinating is in Laughton's mind, that wasn't true. Laughton did not see this as a step forward. He saw this as a throwback.
Right.
He was obsessed with the films of D.W. Griffith.
Mm-hmm.
And this whole movie for him was all about, I want to do the things that the silent filmmakers used to do.
Mm-hmm.
And, the casting of Gish, I think, is part of that because he loved Lillian Gish as a star.
Right.
And when you watch it, and when you watch it with that context, right, you realize, like, we're all talking about, like, well, you can't really watch a lot of films from the 50s that look like this, right? But, I mean, they don't look as good because it was, decades before. But, like, you can find movies from the silent era that look like this and feel like this.
Yeah, and I think all, like, and maybe that's part of the... I do also feel like, and I don't like. Obviously, I think this movie's a masterpiece, and it is interesting that it wasn't appreciated in its time. But I also wonder if its stylistic look was seen back then as corny, and maybe that's why it wasn't appreciated. Because now we look at it as almost like it's a stylistic choice, and it's cool because it doesn't. It really is very rare, considering. But back then, it's probably like this. Like if you were the age of the kids in this movie and watched this movie, I wonder if you would think if it looks old.
Yeah.
Like this looks like a movie like my
And-
grandparents would
And
be
you
into.
know, it's funny too because he says about want to be a throwback to the oldest silent movies and all that, and you feel that. But another element that bleeds through, which when you do some research on this, is that he wanted it to have the feeling, like he wanted to bring his stage directing experience to
Yeah.
the movie, and he wanted to bring that. So in some ways, this does have a little bit of, not even a little bit, a lot of feeling of what like Orson was doing when he was directing movies.
Oh, absolutely.
There's a good Orson Welles feel to this, but like its own thing. He doesn't feel like it's copying Orson, but you get that same sense of two guys from stage, really well established, well respected directors of stage making a movie and kind of just changing the game. And also both not really getting the credit at the time. And
right.
More so this one than Citizen Kane, but even Citizen Kane got dinged at the time.
I bet Orson Welles was really mad when he saw this movie.
Oh,
I bet he was really upset that he didn't get to, because it's funny you say that, Tom. This really does feel like a movie Orson wants to make. Like the type of movie he's tried to chase.
The Mitchum character feels like a character Orson would play, a kind of a bloviating idiot. Where it's like that's one of the best things. One of my favorite things about the movie is that Mitchum is a threat, but he's also a moron. He's not that smart.
There's also another Orson connection, by the way.
Stanley Cortez.
That's right, Tom. This is shot by Stanley Cortez, who shot.
Because I was just going to mention that Stanley Cortez, in an interview later in his life, said there's only two filmmakers I ever worked with that had an intrinsic, in their core, understanding of lighting, and it was Orson and Charles Laughton.
Right, which makes perfect sense. Yeah, like Magnificent Ambersons is a beautiful looking movie, and like Cortez is one of those guys who just within the black and white cinematography, like monochrome sphere, like all those guys, the guys who specialize in black and white, he was one of the best.
Yeah. Oh yeah, without a doubt. I mean, you could have just did his work with Orson and been like, oh, this is the best guy to ever do it. But then to like drop this into the CV, you just go, oh well, now he's just kind of showing off at this point.
Right. It makes me wish that like we had more Charles Laughton movies, because I know like the fact that this one wasn't a success, that prevented him from like getting another shot at directing something that big again. Which I feel like this isn't even that big of a budget a movie for its time. It feels like it just feels like we could have gotten more opportunities to see different movies like this from him. I would be curious to see what else he would do.
I mean, I would have loved to have seen more movies from him, absolutely, but there's something to be said about kind of just doing this in and out, just drop the hammer and then just leave and leave everybody wanting more. But there's there's conflicting reports about why he never directed again. I know the big one that everyone likes to report is that the failure of this movie was so crushing to him. He said, "Oh, I'm not going to do it anymore." Blah blah blah.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also reports that say he didn't make another movie again because he just didn't want to. He wanted to focus more on stage directing and acting in movies occasionally, but more just like his passion was the stage. So there's a little bit of a what if. Yeah, but at the same time, I feel like this was all we were going to get from him, honestly. It almost feels like this is such a weird... Because that's the thing. It is a weird movie. Like, like like, you watch Citizen Kane, and that's a movie that feels unique for its time, but you watch it now and it doesn't feel weird. It feels just
Sure,
like a
sure.
great movie. This
Yeah.
is, and this, I'm saying this is a good thing. I love, but it's a weird movie tonally, structurally. The fact that the point of view is basically told from like a 10-year-old boy's perspective, that, you know, that it's this, but it's also, so like, it's kind of goes from like a kiddie movie in some scenes where it's kids playing and having fun to, oh, Robert Mitchum is this weird psychosexual preacher who's killing 25 widows and hunting children at this point. And, you know, oh, we go to this magical land where Lillian Gish. God, I was doing that all fucking day. Lillian Gish is just like this haven for orphans, and everyone just accepts that she's a haven for orphans in town. And then she pulls out a shotgun and fucking shoots Robert Mitchum, and you're like, what the fuck is this movie? So, but like, not in a bad way. Somehow it works. So it almost feels like this was just the culmination of kind of whatever was in his mind, what he was going to do, and he's just like, I did it. I'm never going to find anything else again that will match this weird whiplash fucking roller coaster zigzagging movie ever again. What, like, anything else he followed after it would by default feel rote and blasé, like, honestly.
Yeah, I feel like he would have wanted to branch out to direct like different genres, and he would, maybe after this he would have done a musical that was just okay. And like, and also by all reports, the kids didn't really like working with Laughton. I understand.
Oh,
like
I'm
those two stars. I feel like have. I remember I watched the special, the extras on the Criterion channel that were up there, and the way he talks to them is pretty rough.
Yeah, there's that. So there is. We'll get into that. There's the Charles Laughton directs The Night of the Hunter, which is a 2.5-hour documentary on the Criterion for a 90-minute movie, which is largely made up of the scraps that were left over from the film that had been donated to UCLA, but then UCLA students were using them as like filler for their film cameras, and they were immediately taken away from UCLA. And yeah, in that documentary, like, you get to hear Laughton directing the actors, right? And you get to hear what he was like on set, and doesn't seem like a great creatively fulfilling set to be on. I think
it felt like a very contentious set.
Yeah, doesn't seem like the most succinct communicator.
Between him and his, you know, aggressive ways, the fact that Mitchum and Shelley Winters really did not get along, that
Which
Mitchum
is hilarious.
It's very hilarious. That Mitchum was a drunk at the time, was having his own having his own issues. It's amazing that anything good even came out of it, where it seemed like everyone fucking hated each other.
Well, and on top of all that, and then we will get to the registry statement if anybody's wondering, because we always play it like a start, but we have to get into this because there's just so much to get into. Also, weirdly, the unspoken name in the room is Bertolt Brecht, because I believe Laughton was very interested. He got very invested in Brecht. I think Brecht cast him in a play, right?
Right.
And I think what happens is Laughton, Simon Callow is the one who brings this up, right? Which is Brechtian acting is what he calls acting with quotation marks, right?
Okay.
And you can very much see what Mitchum is doing in the film is Brechtian acting, right? And that's what Laughton is looking for, right?
Sure.
Very, you know, I mean, that moment where, you know, when Mitchum is doing the odd hand poses before he kills Shelley Winters and all of that, it's very dramatic. It's very, you know, it's not kind of, it's anti-naturalistic acting, right?
His performance is not subtle.
No.
He is crazy. Like, his character is a murderer.
And the reason I say that is because you can feel the other actors in this movie who are not on board with Brechtian acting And then you
Mhm.
watch Charles Laughton directs as he's basically just giving fucking line readings to everybody and the
Right.
vaguest directions. You know, people make fun of George Lucas with his faster and more intense, you know, but there you are
Mhm.
watching him dealing with this child actor who was considered like a prodigy for his day, like the Haley Joel Osment of his time.
That's what I was reading. That was Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off,
No,
but I
yeah.
was reading that, and I found that fascinating because I was like, oh, these kids seem like they're not terrible, but they feel like they're new or they're not like. And then I read this like, oh, they're both actually like really like the kid actors of the time. Like, what's Jesse Eisenberg's sister's name?
I don't know.
From Polly and the Pepsi commercials.
Oh, yes. I do not remember the name. But I know
like
what you're
like Jesse Eisenberg and his sister. Like,
Yeah.
It's like, oh, these kids are everywhere all the time.
and you hear
And,
Laughton just like going like, again, do it again,
Mm-hmm.
turn back, turn this way, forward.
Him talking to the kids is especially pretty rough because he's like, it seems like he was a pretty difficult, you know, he's one of those like English actors from like another time that just have, there's no levity to them. There's just like, there's only like this sardonic like type of disaffected humor. And when you talk to children that way, it sounds especially cruel. And Shelley Winters is also like one of those actresses who's extremely like puts everything into herself and emotions everywhere. Like Stanley Kubrick was also not like a fan. Was like didn't get along with her as well. And I know like she's been like directors have been like really fed up with her and stuff just because she's so like emotional. But she was great.
There's this incredible moment, and then I'll get into the register. But I told Tom, about this. I said there's a moment in the Charles Laughton documentary that he hadn't seen. I'm like, I want to tell you about this. I want to be able to tell you, which is, so Laughton made the decision on this film that he wanted to direct it like a silent movie, which meant instead of calling cut, he would just give directions to people as they were acting. He's standing next to the camera, right?
Oh, right.
And he's recording sound and picture and everything, and he will just shout directions at them in the scene, right? The kid would be just like, during the no, don't, scene, right? Toward the end, Laughton is literally like, even though it would be a pain in the ass to edit out, he's still just next to the camera going, louder, now, you're upset, think of your father, think of this,
That makes a lot of sense considering a lot of the edits and cuts, especially on close-ups, are very short.
Yeah.
There's a lot of like uneven footage of like people. Like there's one moment when like Harry Powell is questioning the boy about something, and they just cut to his face and he's laughing like nah, like it's just like it feels like out of nowhere, and that was maybe it's like, oh, okay, these are kids that like won a contest to be in a movie or something.
So,
like they're not.
So he's doing this to Shelley Winters, right? When they're doing the big revival tent scene, right?
Yeah.
When she's doing the oh my god, and have you seen this clip, Tom? Do you know where I'm going with this? I mean,
no.
I'll tell you. So he's yelling at Shelley Winters when she's like, and I drove a man away because and he's like, no more, louder, and she's going bigger and bigger, and he just keeps yelling, pray, say a prayer, pray, and he's yelling at her to pray, and Shelley Winters is getting so worked up, and then she just yells out a prayer in Hebrew because Shelley Winters was Jewish,
right?
And it doesn't obviously it can't fit in the scene, but it is just a remarkable thing to see because that came from the gut. That she's just being yelled at until she lets out this guttural Hebrew prayer. She seems miserable on that goddamn set.
Sure.
And I do wonder, like, Tom, you alluded to the fact that like Shelley Winters and Robert Mitchum didn't get along. And I wonder if part of that is Mitchum was fully on board for this Brechtian acting, right? Mitchum was fully on board for like, I am your puppet. I will do what you want me to do. And Shelley either wasn't on board or didn't even know that was the name of the game, and it almost feels like when you watch that behind the scenes footage that she showed up with hockey pads and skates and is mystified that Mitchum just keeps getting buckets on the basketball court. You know what I mean? Where she's just looking at it going, hang on, I didn't know we were doing this.
And you know,
those are two energies that are very different. Shelley Winters cares deeply about everything, it
Yeah.
seems like, and Robert Mitchum is just one of those guys that can kind of like walk through life not really caring about a lot of things and like be totally fine. It's why he was super cool and why people liked him and why he was a movie star. I think he was like I'm sure like, you know, he's watching, or like, you know, there's that, you know, there's this take of Shelley Winters being berated to pray by Laughton and her fully going into this prayer in Hebrew and be just out of sheer frustration, is like there's something coming out of it through this psychological abuse. And I'm sure Mitchum's just strolling. I was like, "Where's my mark?
Well, I mean, and look,
Where do I stand?
You're an
Where do you want me to stand, Charlie?"
but you're an actor, David. You know, you've had
Yeah.
these, and I think, you know, even beyond just like personal style, like I'm sure, you know, there are projects you've been on, you know, where you know that the approach is, I need to come in and I need to understand why my character is doing these things, right?
Yeah,
And I need to
right.
bring that to it. And I'm sure there have been other projects, commercials, whatever, where you're like, right, I show up, I say what they tell me to say, I hit the marks they tell me to hit, like,
Mm-hmm.
and then I go home because I'm here to be that kind of prop for this scene, right? I'm sure
Mm-hmm.
you've done both of those kind of things, and I think in this
Right.
case, like, Mitchum understands that he's supposed to be the latter for this, right? That he's supposed to
Mm-hmm.
show up, and if Charles gives you a line reading, you know, and I think what Shelley's dealing with is the opposite of like, if you know, you showed up to shoot a Taco Bell commercial and the director came over and he went, David, I need to know the backstory of Man at
Yeah.
Drive-Thru. I need you to
Right,
dig
right,
deep.
right.
And you'd be like, shit, man, I came here so that I could pull up and say burrito, please. Like, what are we doing? You
Damn,
know?
I'm not
well, I mean,
prepared.
Yeah.
Shit.
even Mitchum got along the best with Lawton, but even Mitchum was getting under Lawton's skin after a while with his
Sure.
being a drunk shit. There's one story of Mitchum showing up to set one day really drunk, and the producer was like, "You're in no condition to work." So, what was Mitchum's response? He went to the guy's car and pissed on his front seat.
Hilarious. That's yeah. That's what you do when you're a king. That's pretty
That is
awesome.
what you do when you're I've been there.
Awesome.
But I think that just goes to show the differences between the acting styles of just Mitchum could just Mitchum's a great actor, but Mitchum is not one
Yeah.
of those guys that needs to dig deep and turn it on and find the soul. He's just like, oh, it's a role. Okay, what's the guy?
Yeah.
He's a weird preacher who kills when he gets horny. Great, awesome. Let's do
Right.
that.
Right.
Charles, tell me the mood of this scene. Awesome, great. Where Shelley, she needs to put a little extra sauce on the taco there, and sometimes
I
it works
do
and sometimes it doesn't.
I do appreciate. I read that like Billy Chapin, who plays the kid, the main kid, he said that Mitchum was that like you know, Lawton, he really didn't understand what he wanted him to do with his direction, but like Mitchum actually really like kind of directed him through his scenes.
Yeah, apparently Mitchum was really good with the kids. For all of
Which I'm
his
glad.
drunken antics, by all accounts, except for that one producer who got his car pissed on.
Right.
Mitchum was a good guy, and he clashed with Shelley Winters and everything, but he wasn't like an abusive prick, and he was nice to the kids.
Robert Mitchum just seemed like, I mean, he got busted for pot in the 40s. Like
Yeah.
he sounds super cool.
This is another thing I read was that Lawton had a lot of issues, getting along with like macho guys, but that he got along really well with Mitchum. But like he got along really well with Mitchum, who was put up. He said Mitchum put up a front of being this macho guy who's like not dumb, but not like an intellectual, but that behind the scenes, he's very soft spoken. He's very caring. He's very intellectual. He was always reading a book and all of this.
Yeah.
So, Mitchum definitely seemed like he knew what his vibe was, what his movie star persona really was. And, that sometimes that's easier to work with. I don't know. Yeah, I
I
mean,
remember
at the end
hearing
of
a
his
story. Oh, sorry.
well, just quick at the end, not towards the end of his life, but like 70s or 80s or whatever. In an interview, Mitchum said best director he ever worked with was Charles Laughton, and that Night of the
Yeah,
Hunter was his favorite movie he ever did. So
sure.
so there's something to be said about Mitchum was just the right guy for the role, and he
Oh yeah.
he did it. He did it, guys. He did it.
Well, on that,
I just remember hearing a story. I used to love. I remember hearing a story that James Caan told of like one of his first jobs was in a movie with Mitchum, and that Mitchum kept calling him Jiminy Cricket, which is really funny. I think he was like he described him as being like young, and he's like I think he's like smiling or something. He's like not sure what to do with his face on camera, and Mitchum's like, "Sure are smiling, Jiminy Cricket."
That must have been Rio Grande, right, Mike?
Oh, probably, yeah.
Yeah.
So normally when I set up the clip we play of the registry statement, I go, before we talk any more about the film.
Seems like we're almost at the end of our discussion.
Before we continue more on about Night of the Hunter and what we have to say, let's talk about what the Library of Congress had to say. Here's what the National Film Registry says about Night of the Hunter.
This dark allegory of good versus evil defies conventional genre definition with its occasionally outrageous dark humor, bucolic settings contrasted with gothic images, and an unsettling child's eye perspective. A deranged preacher, played by Robert Mitchum, terrorizes two children in possession of stolen loot and eventually comes up against a saintly protector of runaway and abandoned children, played by Lillian Gish.
So, one of the things that statement mentions that I don't think we've had a chance to really touch on yet, because you don't really think of it with this movie, is it mentions the dark humor, right?
Oh, it's so funny.
That's the thing. It's really easy to forget that this movie...
I think the funniest thing is the ice cream shop husband. This sad little man whose wife is just constantly browbeating him and making fun of him, and he's just like in the background, just like, come on, man, or just go talk to him. She just left. Harry's like, what do you want me to do? I can't talk to the guy about this stuff. Should I get him liquor? Like, I don't know what you want me to do.
That liquor moment is hilarious. That's one of my favorite moments of the movie when the guy goes like, "Look, just get some brandy from it's like, Walt, that's for sickness in the house." Like, what? It's peach brandy, and he takes a swig, and his eyes cross when he drinks the snifter. It's really funny. He's just like he just fully crosses his eyes like a full on like alky.
See, I think, to me, weirdly, especially this time, the funniest part is what Mitchum himself does whenever he gets injured. Because he gives this... Yeah. This preacher has been menacing this whole movie, and then when he gets shot at or something, he lets out like a Looney Tunes yelp.
Yeah.
You know?
He's so
smart
good,
decision.
man.
You know,
I was thinking about this
so
this
good.
time watching around. I also thought of Home Alone. Watching this movie of like just Joe Pesci and Joe Pesci and Daniel Stern are Robert Mitchum in this movie.
Well, you know what else definitely took inspiration from this? Death Proof.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. 100%. Yeah, absolutely.
Stuntman Mike is 100% a Harry Powell.
Mm-hmm.
1-to-1, like pretty much.
I mean, I think that it's kind of one of the things that we've lost in recent sort of horror thriller movies, right? Is everybody is an unstoppable killing machine now, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Whereas part of what makes Night of the Hunter so scary is that this man has a body count, right? This man is responsible for killing a number of people, and very easily could have killed that young girl, very easily could have killed the children, very easily could have killed a bunch of people. He could have killed that woman in the burlesque house had he not been, caught for stealing a car. And he's just a regular guy. There's nothing particularly stealthy about him. There's nothing he's akin to like Joseph Cotton in Shadow of a Doubt, right? This is just a guy.
Yeah.
And I think that
It's like another movie, like an early portrayal of like before the term was coined, early depiction of a serial killer.
Yeah, then back then they called them Bluebeards, which they say in this film too. It's
Bluebeards, right?
He's a normal guy. But like I said before, he's an idiot.
Yeah,
he's not particularly good at this. What I love that's actually going on is that it's a critique of small town America, which is that everyone just immediately trusts this guy because he's got the outfit, even though if you see a preacher with fucking finger tattoos, you immediately go, no.
That's kind of a red flag. Yeah.
No. The only people in the fucking 40s or the 50s, whatever. Wait, is this movie set earlier?
The movie takes place in
the Depression. 30s. Yeah, it
takes place during the Depression. Oh, even better. You see someone as a preacher. The only people back then who had tattoos were convicts and fucking soldiers. So
sailors.
So you see that, but these fucking yokels just see this guy and they're like, oh, obviously he's a preacher. Look at his great story about love and hate, and he's doing this. That's a man who knows his Bible. He's got to be a good man. And you just go, what are you talking about? This guy's insane. Look at him talk.
He's fully insane. And there are moments where he's like, there's moments where his behavior is so disturbing, and there are moments that are highlighted that are a little like, I know we were saying he's not like a subtle character, but there are moments where I don't think this is subtlety, but like, he's a character who says he's a preacher.
Yeah.
Like there's no history. He's banking that people won't ask questions because he knows a couple of stories from the Bible. He goes around with his weird hat and talks about how he preaches the word of God, but he's not like formally ordained or trained in any ministry or church. When Peter Graves asked him, what church do you belong to? And he's like, basically like, the church that, the church between what me and the Lord worked out between us. Like you fucking, like none of you, like that's what he's trying to say. It's just like my religion.
Yeah. And what's great is that he kind of catches on to it. The ice cream husband kind of is close. Yeah. Is kind of close to being suspicious.
Yes,
but the fact that Lillian Gish immediately clocks this guy of just, oh, this guy is full of shit. There's something wrong with him. I'm going to play a little game with him to really get some of the truth out of him. And the second things go wrong, she pulls a shotgun on his ass and says, get the fuck out of here.
She's not impressed with the love and hate story. She's immediately like, wait, no, go back. How do you know these kids?
Well,
yeah,
I mean, I think
that's so great. But the one thing that I do love, a character decision that I do love, is that he does actually believe in God.
Oh yeah.
Is that we start the movie with him. There's nobody else around, so this is just for him. He's having a conversation with God, where he thinks God thinks it's okay that he's killing widows for money.
Yes. His character is he is a prophet. Like he believes he's being told to do this.
Well, so he's not like some guy who doesn't believe and is using it as like a con. There is a con element to it.
Of course, yeah.
Because he's not actually a preacher, but he does actually think there is a God and that he's talking to him.
Well, and
when the judge catches him, when the judge tries him for stealing that car, he's like, you're sentenced, Harry Powell, and he interrupts the judge and says, excuse me, that's preacher Harry Powell, and the judge is like, okay,
we found you in a house of ill repute,
like whatever, okay, you're going to jail, preacher.
I mean,
like he's like putting up that front, being like, hey, look. I don't care where I am. You talk to me like I'm a preacher.
And it's interesting because, we talk about, his relationship with God and what he believes in God. And, David, you said he sees himself as a prophet. I think one of the masterstrokes of this is multiple times in the film, we hear him singing this hymn that was written in like, I think the 1870s. Right.
Yes.
Leaving.
So it's leaning. It's leaning.
Leaning.
So it's
all right. I'm not a drunk or anything.
It's leaning, safe and secure from all alarm, leaning. leaning on the everlasting arm, which the everlasting arm in this case, the implication being God, right?
Of course.
Now,
Yes.
there are two different sets of lyrics to that song.
Mm-hmm.
The more commonly sung one, I think, at the time, is what we hear Lillian Gish do.
Yeah,
which is,
that's what I was wondering,
Yeah.
because I know she sings it differently, and I was always curious of like, oh right,
it's
this is the real song.
well,
Like
they're both.
Harry Powell is singing some. I assumed he like only like. I mean, I guess I heard this somewhere. Like he's just
Well, she only changes a little bit, and this is what's telling, right?
Sure.
So he's singing, leaning, leaning, leaning on the everlasting arm.
and
leaning.
She sings
leaning on Jesus, leaning on Jesus, leaning on the ever. So
Yeah.
he's taken Jesus out of it. In his
Right.
mind, he is leaning on the everlasting arm, right?
Right.
Not
right.
I'm leaning on Jesus, my connection to God. He,
right.
the supposed preacher, sees himself as, no, I am with God. I am Jesus.
Well,
I am that.
And it's I am the everlasting arm, because what's his MO? He fucking stabs people. He uses his everlasting arm to send people to the hereafter.
His love-hate finger tattoos are his connection with God, like his justification for why he does what he does.
And that's why there's one thing that struck me watching this and listening to the score especially that I hadn't picked up on before is I'm listening to the score of this, and Tom and I tend to do a lot of like, well, who must have watched this film? I hadn't made this connection before, but as I was listening to the score, I went, oh, this sounds very Sweeney Todd, right? This sounds and Sondheim obviously was a big cinephile, but when you think about it, what's the motif that he really brings into the Sweeney Todd story from those old Penny Dreadfuls is the idea of Todd, who looks in the show with the vest and the rolled up sleeves, Todd talking about how his razor blades are an extension of his arm, right? That he talks about the razor blade. The razor blades in Sweeney Todd are treated the exact same way the switchblade is treated in this film, right?
Sure.
That he views it as a weapon, as an extension of himself, right?
Well,
you know
what else? Now that you mention it, because I'm not as well versed in musical theater and all that, so I wouldn't have thought of that. But now that you said it, it makes me think, because one of the things that this movie's doing so great, and I make the joke that it's about how stupid small town America is, but it's kind of true. But really, what the movie's really saying is blind faith is bad, because Lillian Gish believes, but she doesn't have blind faith. She's not stupid. She will question things, and she will take things as real. Like, she lives in the real world. Just because a guy comes up to your gate in a preacher's outfit doesn't mean you automatically trust him. Which feels like something that kind of runs through Sweeney Todd, because people just go to a barber and it's just like, hey, yeah, shave me. Yeah, and that's just so like, that's a lot of trust you're putting into someone's hands of just, put a sharp fucking blade up against my neck while I sit prone and motionless.
Well, and then with that, with Todd, again, take it back to, like in Sweet Todd, the way they establish Todd, right, is, to get to at least Pirelli, the supposed best barber from London, shows up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Todd bests him in a shaving contest, right? So the populace goes, well, he's better than Pirelli, the greatest barber. And then, of course, you find out Pirelli is not from London. He's just a guy with a fake mustache doing a fake accent. And all of these people are buying into this fake prestige, right? And that is such a crucial part of this, is the fake prestige he carries. The other element, too, Tom, you're describing it as, how stupid people in a small town can be. And you're also saying about the blind faith. Both of those actually are a confluence of what sort of genre the Night of the Hunter novel comes out of, which is Southern Gothic.
Have either of you read the novel?
No, because it is out of print. It is very hard to find, but it is
I've always wanted to. I've heard. I imagine it's. I like Southern Gothic a lot. It does sound like if the content of the movie is close to the book, it seems like it would have been a unique book for when it came out as well.
Well, the interesting thing about it is, so the novel is very Southern Gothic. You know, it's akin to like Faulkner, or the one I kept thinking of is Flannery O'Connor's Wise Blood, for obvious reasons.
Oh, I love that book.
Have you seen the film?
I am okay. I don't love the film, but I really like the book.
I just enjoy.
That's a John Huston film.
Yes, it is. It is. That's right. I forgot. Yeah.
There we go. It all comes full circle.
But the thing that makes this interesting is that the novel may be Southern Gothic, but Laughton didn't bring in a Southern Gothic writer to adapt it. You know, we were talking about we just did a couple weeks ago. We did Double Indemnity, right? Mm-hmm. And that is, why am I forgetting his name now? The author of Double
James
Indemnity.
M. Cain.
That's a James M. Cain novel that Raymond Chandler adapts. One noir novelist adapting another, and that has sensibilities. The screenwriter for Night of the Hunter is James Agee, who did Let Us Now Praise Famous Men. So you didn't bring in a Southern Gothic guy. You brought in a guy who is known for adapting the Depression, the realism of the Depression, you know. So essentially, you brought in somebody to take a novel that, you know, most Southern Gothic novels are sympathetic but cynical, right? They're about a dying time, a dying place, people trapped in the past. But instead of bringing in somebody who can bring out those flavors, instead, you've brought in somebody who is more of a realist. You've brought in somebody who James Agee, left to his own devices, you know, if you were just like, James, write a Depression movie, he's going to give you the Grapes of Wrath.
Sure.
You know? But if you say, James, adapt this Southern Gothic novel, I think that's what helps add a lot of extra weight and sadness to the children, to the young girl, right? The young girl that,
Pearl.
Yeah, Pearl, the town fast girl, to the Gish character.
Ruby. Ruby's a really funny character too. A poor girl. She just wants to like grow up.
Well, I mean, it's also I mean, a movie that's so much about like how repression drives you fucking crazy. Like the fact that Ruby is so repressed that she's so easily able to fall under Harry's charms, and even as he's getting dragged to the goddamn gallows, she's like, I don't believe it. I think he's great. I love you, Harry. And it's just like, Ruby,
get a grip, girl. Come on.
Jesus Christ,
no man is worth this.
I think it's you know,
Dick ain't that good, bro. Dick is not that good.
Ruby is, it's really, I mean, to watch it now, especially, like, there is this thing of like, you know, obviously now we're all talking about the effects of, you know, trauma and the effects of sexual abuse on a young person. And there is the thing about watching this and you're like, oh, they got this locked down. Because there's that great thing about, there's that amazing line that you don't know how they got past any kind of censorship board, where when, you know, obviously Mitchum leaves, right? He's talking to her, he gets the information and he flees, right?
Yeah, he leaves the confectionery place.
And then she turns to the boys and she goes, I wouldn't have even made him buy me ice cream first. And you're like, fuck, that is like the Hayes office must have been sleeping that day. You know, like that's like, you know.
I read that the producer of this movie was a guy named Paul Gregory. Mm-hmm. And I think he worked for the censorship. He's
the guy who Mitchum's peed it on his car. That's the guy. Yeah,
that's the guy. Okay, that's very funny. That's like I was wondering. I'm like, I bet with him at the helm, he might have been able to get a couple things to slip by.
Well, you know,
argue that it was because it was a criticism on religion. But I think you could, at the time, you could also make the case that it's a criticism on false. It's like it's a movie about a false prophet.
Yeah. I mean, you know, for all, like, it is for all that we're saying about, like, we're kind of shocked at like how violent it is for the time and how sexual it is for the time. It still smartly is able to dance around a lot of the stuff without being graphic. Yeah. So like you could see a version of this movie made.
The most graphic it really gets is when those two boys who want to go out with Ruby, like, there's like the old lady thinks she's taking sewing lessons on Thursday, and then one of those boys is Billy Chapin's older brother Mike,
Mhm.
who's also like a kid actor from. I was like, they look real similar, but that Mike goes, here goes nothing, and just walks up and goes for it, like to go talk to her right before Harry Powell. To me, that's one of the more salacious parts of the movie, where he's just like, well, here's my shot. I'm going to shoot my shot now. And then like, yeah.
One of the things they had to censor that I think is so funny is, so James Agee wrote a scene that does not appear in the novel, which is the scene in the burlesque house where Harry Powell gets picked up.
Yeah.
Right? Which, interestingly enough, I texted Tom this. I thought this was interesting. You might find this interesting, David. The burlesque dancer who's, up there on the stage swinging it around, she also appeared in a film with Robert Mitchum's Out of the Past co-star Kirk Douglas. She is one of the women on Ned Land's arms in Disney's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea at the very beginning. You remember how the first introduction we get to Kirk Douglas, he's got two sex workers on his arms, and then gets into a brawl, aka Tom's favorite scene in cinematic history.
I mean, it's the aesthetic I live for.
That's a wild Disney movie.
Yeah,
my whole dream aesthetic is to be able to just walk into a bar, two prostitutes on my arm, looking like a drunken sailor. I usually get like 2/3 of it down every night, but it's not always the same 2/3.
Well, because you also want to befriend a seal. Like that's
that's why I got my dog. It's a land seal. Blondie's a land seal.
But anyway, so Agee wrote the scene in the burlesque house, and the thing that he had written in there was the scene. You see Mitchum gripping his hate hand, and then he reaches. Yeah. It was supposed to be he reaches into his pants pocket and flicks the switchblade, and it pops out like an erection. And he was told it can't be the pants pocket; it has to be the coat pocket. Now, here's the thing I want to stress. I've watched this movie many times. I have seen it several times over the last 20 years. This is the first time I ever went, oh, I'll be damned, it's not his pants pocket. So for all of this, it has to be the coat pocket. Like I always
clocked that it was his coat pocket, but I was just like, it's still his dick coming out of his pants.
What I'm saying is
his coat is like framed a little bit towards his crotch.
That's what I'm saying is it's shot in such a way, like I'm so caught up in like the it's an erection thing. It's
shot in such a way that like he's standing like this, so his pocket is like here, so like it comes out and it makes it look like he's got a really tiny dick.
It's funny that the blade is so short. It's also
it's like a decent sized blade, but the way it's framed, like the point where it comes to the pants and then sticks out, it makes it look like the knife.
It's almost like he's trying
here.
to hide. It's almost like he's trying to hide his erection.
That's why he's so mad. He's got little dick energy and and listen
I just want to stress we've been doing these video episodes just for this season. And anytime I make a gesture to pretend I'm grabbing something or I even get too weird near the mic, Tom often points out to me, Mike, you may not want to do that. That might look weird out of context. Tom just stood up, pointed to his crotch on camera. Then David, when you said, it's my favorite is you went, I mean, it's a pretty small blade. And Tom goes, no. It's a decent sized blade. It's just the way he was standing. Every part of that was just an incredible sequence.
It's a very. I feel like it would be a Hays Code approved.
One of the OG Little Dick Energy movies, which, listen, I'm making jokes. Obviously, that's my role on this podcast. The one that doesn't want to be here. It's kind of not really a joke, but okay. No, but honestly, I do actually feel like this movie is kind of lost in the conversation in terms of the arc of horror movies, especially slasher movies, because we always talk about slasher movies.
Slasher. Yeah,
it's definitely a slasher. But in the arc of slasher movies, we always talk about how slasher movies, especially in the 80s, were all about sexuality and repression and punishing those who are having sex. And the killers are these repressed men with their big phallic symbols plunging into innocent young girls. That's straight up the text of this movie. He is a repressed man who, anytime he gets horny or sees a woman that's horny, he has to kill them.
Right,
because
right, right.
and just the arc of all of that. We always talk about Psycho in terms of that because Norman's a repressed boy. For those in horror 101, in the advanced horror classes, we talk about Peeping Tom. Great fucking
Sure,
movie. He's
sure.
getting a
Yeah,
Criterion.
they're great. Yeah.
Can't wait to get that 4K disc. But it feels like this movie, if people talk about it, it's got a Criterion, just got a great 4K disc from Kino. Movie lovers love it, and all of that. But I feel like in terms of the arc of horror, where you could trace things and put dots on the line, I feel like this kind of gets lost in the fray, and it also kind
feel
of
like oh, sorry, go ahead.
just also it feels like it almost invented a kind of horror movie, a specific kind of slasher movie that kind of pops up later, because this is kind of the Stepfather. There's those kind of horror movies that exist after this.
I feel like if you did that, if you put the movies that you just brought up, Tom, on that like evolution of human chart of like from Cro-Magnon to like like the Encino Man poster.
Yeah.
But like if you do that,
that's a great reference.
If you do that with Night of the Hunter, Psycho, Peeping Tom, Halloween, like that's the trajectory. It's like and it's a very similar spine.
And I
absolutely.
Can we talk quickly about Peter Graves?
Oh, absolutely.
It's so weird that he's in this movie.
I texted Tom immediately. I said, the dad shows up, gives his kid the money, and then asks him if he's ever been to a Turkish prison.
You like gladiator movies, Billy?
Have you ever seen a grown man naked?
I think of him, and every time I think of Peter Graves, I think of Airplane, and then I think of Phil Hartman's impression of Peter Graves.
Yeah.
On his own audition tape for SNL, and then that one sketch that's in Phil Hartman's Best of compilation where he's Peter Graves hosting like a science like Mr. Wizard show, and he's just like, "Welcome to another episode of Discover." And I think about it's so fun. It just makes me laugh.
It's just one of those things, man. It's not the movie's fault, but it's just like it's like when you watch Forbidden Planet, and it's just like, oh, there's Leslie Nielsen. I'm supposed to take him serious.
You can't the movie couldn't have known who Peter Graves would end up like being iconic for.
Well,
but,
I will say though,
I also just think of like Peter Graves. Peter Graves, 1955. We talk about like another actor that always made me think of Graves. Like another similar type of actor to Graves is, of course, Shatner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And like I think I bet Shatner auditioned for this part. I bet him and Graves were up for a lot of the same roles. And I think like we ding Shatner sometimes for like, especially as a younger actor, it's like, oh, he's like a bad actor or whatever. I don't necessarily think that's true. I think he's pretty hammy, but he's also extremely like entertaining, obviously. Yeah. But like I think of Graves as the same type of actor. Like they're both of that sort of young guy of that time, kind of over delivering stuff, but like also very, they're kind of granite faced and like charming in a way, but they're like, there's like, they're like Shatner pre Star Trek. You're like, any like him in Twilight Zone, him in all these things. You're like, in 5 years, that guy's going to have a movie career. You'll just get like, wait and see, whatever. Graves, he eventually finds success with Mission Impossible and the Airplane movies, but like I find them very, very similar.
Well, my thing, and I maybe have a weird thing because I only got it really this viewing, but my take on Graves and the character that I never really picked up before, I think in Laughton's own weird way, he's a satirical character, and I think that he is specifically a satire of Tom Joad. I think that Graves and the way that he's playing him and all of that feels very kind of Fonda Joad, because there is this thing of there is this thing of you always forget it, right? You remember that the plot is that Peter Graves' character shows up and he goes, I got this money from a robbery, hide the money. You forget that he shows up and he goes, I stole this money because I couldn't bear to think of these kids with empty bellies while others have. And he basically is giving the he's practically giving the, whenever there's poor people struggling, I'll be there. Whenever there's, children with empty bellies, I'll be there. And then, of course, the joke of it, in a way, is he's doing his grandstanding, like, I couldn't stand to have somebody, some kid starving. And then he gets fucking killed by the state. and then the money is meaningless. None of it needed to happen.
He did kill 2 people.
Yeah.
I'm curious if in the book there, like, he's even more tragic. Like, his accomplice killed 2 people, and then his accomplice was killed in the police shootout, and he wasn't responsible for his death, but he survived, so he has to take the blame.
Or is he less tragic, and is this something James Agee added to it?
Sure,
right?
Sure.
So that's also a
there's that to it.
Well, I mean, he's definitely a guy that can hold his own because he very easily takes care of Harry Powell in prison. In one of the best scenes of the movie, fucking just Mitchum just hanging upside down. Why don't you tell me where the money is, and I'll go take care of your family? And he just fucking knocks him off the goddamn.
He's very good in this. Like, I do want to be clear. Like, I do think Peter Graves is good in this movie. He's very. I like his like interrogation of Harry Powell. Like. Which church do you belong to? Just like, keep talking, preacher. Then stuffs the sock in his mouth and goes to sleep.
In the Charles Laughton directs, there is a clip that is so funny, which is, Mitchum is hanging down, Graves punches him. You hear Mitchum make a noise as he lands, and then off screen, you just hear somebody go, You good, Bobby? Yeah, I'm all right.
I love that. Funny. I love that just because I'm just like, oh, Mitchum, you're just taking that fall like a champ. I mean, I wouldn't fight too hard against the Tom Joad thing that you're saying there, Mike, but I also feel like it's kind of just ignoring the fact that it's his kids that he's doing it for. He's not being philanthropic.
I think it like, again, this movie is set during the Depression. Yeah. There's a lot of desperation going on throughout every scene that we see. It makes sense that people would just accept a guy that says he's a preacher that comes to them because maybe he could help them. And like, it's that desperate times thing. I mean, even when the kids go wandering around running away from Harry Powell, that before they run into Lillian Gish, they run into some other lady and she's just handing out potatoes to other wayward kids wandering around. Like, it's really rough out there. Like and it's like near the story takes place in Virginia, right? Mm-hmm. Along the Ohio River. Mm-hmm. And it's a lot of land. It's a lot of those kids wander around like a long way, and you could see like how much suffering there is.
I mean,
something like that probably would drive a guy who had 2 kids to feed and no job, and like,
especially when we get the description that basically that marriage was just one of, well, they really like the fucking, so that's what kept them together.
That's icy. Well, that's Icy's perspective.
Yeah. But you also, I mean, it could be her perspective, but I mean, a guy who does a crime like that, just this kind of random, kind of not very well thought out, people get killed sort of crime of just, I need to feed my children thing, feels like the kind of thinking of a guy.
He might have
been a guy who just, might have just been a guy that
might have been a bad boy.
Might have just been a guy who acted on his passions a little too quickly. Thought with the little head, not the big head, lot.
And we don't know how old they are either. They could be extremely young and not like,
But
it's a young person's folly.
I think the movie is telling us that, the movie is criticizing everybody's judgment, right? Shelley Winters, when she finds the switchblade in Harry Powell's pocket, she goes, men. Yeah. But meanwhile, David, you made the point, like, that was Icy's perspective on why those two got together, right? And because that's on her mind, right? And we get to see that because later, even though Harry Powell does not want sex at all, right? When he is explaining to Icy why she left, and he does that bit where he goes, well, I should have known on our wedding night, she kicked me out of the bed. Because he knows that's what's going to play to her. I mean, one of the things, the reason I mentioned like the Tom Joad satire or anything like that is that there's, I mean, obviously, like, there's Lillian Gish is a heroic figure in this film, and it's very touching. But it almost feels like Laughton's perspective is there's no good people, right? There's everybody is getting duped, everybody's getting fooled, except for Gish, who's the old world figure. But like, you as an audience member are seeing how each person is getting played to or not, right? How each person is getting played, and part of the reason I think that is, obviously we talked about the production code, right? Crime has to pay. So somebody had to be punished for their crimes. There was no world where Robert Mitchum's character got away with anything. But there is something, I think, when you watch a movie as tightly constructed as this and as well thought out as this, and then you see a final 15 minutes as fucking weird as this movie has, right? Where you almost feel like watching it, you're like, okay, Laughton clearly knew that they told him he has to get punished. So what am I going to do? I'm going to have the town of hapless dopes who all loved Mitchum turn into a literal lynch mob that we never condemn, right? And then on top of that, I'm going to introduce a character at the beginning of this movie who is a hangman, who is sad that he just
I love
hung,
that.
But
I love that.
You include a scene where he talks about being sad that he just hung Peter Graves, the Tom Joad guy, right? And that the arc is not him kind of going, killing's wrong. Like, that he starts out being like, I don't know, man, killing, I don't know if we should be killing people. This is kind of fucked. And the ending note that Laughton gives him that has to be a little satirical is him going, no, let me tell you, this one
This will be a privilege.
Yeah, this will be a privilege to kill him.
It's real. That's a really funny
I fucking
joke.
love that. I love that shit so much. I do think he's condemning the lynch mob, though, because the hard cut to the ice cream lady just going, lynch him!
I want to be clear.
Yeah.
I'm saying Laughton is. I'm saying the film introduces a lynch mob.
Yes,
and never has a character condemn it. I'm saying that
right.
Laughton is mocking the overzealous times and the overzealous That's what I mean.
It's really funny. It's
really funny.
It's just but the whole time Icy has been singing his praises, convincing. Basically, she convinced Willa Harper to marry this guy, and then now at the end of the movie, she's clearly drunk too, and just being like, "Bluvband, get out!"
But see,
funny.
What I think is a little more interesting is that I think he's definitely critiquing the mob, but I don't think he's necessarily critiquing the hangman, because I think you need that little release of just yes, it's okay to want this fucking guy to die. You saw what he did, but it shouldn't be the same idiots that all just let him get away with everything. It needs to be someone who's outside of the dupe, outside of the con.
Just one more thing on that hangman beat, because as far as the what we talked about, the humor of this movie, this is a really interesting and great example of joke construction, because this is a bit that has a tail.
Mm-hmm.
This is when we first see this hangman, he's at first you think he's going to be a major character in the movie. You watch his drive home to his wife, and he's just I don't know about all this killing. I think maybe I'd be better back in the mines. And his wife is responds to that basically yes and goes and have me worried the blast in 23 and not on your life. There's all this history of how sad everything is.
Yeah.
To now we cut to the end of the movie, and Harry Powell's being chased by a lynch mob that wants him dead. The police escort him out of jail, get him to safety, and the hangman goes, "Hey, I'll see you soon, pal. Killing's actually pretty great. You're the one that deserves this." It adds so much more of a punch to that moment because we get this his whole perspective on it. It's got this. That's what I mean. It's a bit with a tail. It starts off with the setup, and then the tail is the end of the movie with the punchline.
It's just so funny too, because it's a conversation me and Mike had. One of the funniest early bonding moments with me and Mike in college was we were in a class when it came out that Gaddafi was killed, and all the little lefties were trying to be and listen, we're liberal too, don't get me wrong, but everyone was like, oh my God, that's so horrible. They shouldn't have killed him in the streets. He should have been on trial. And me and Mike were the one guys who were just like, no. He had rape rooms in his castle. Fuck that guy into the sun. Sometimes people just need to be fucking killed.
I mean, my perspective on that, especially at the time, was more like, hey man, we're in Long Island, New York. We're not in Libya. We don't know what these folks are going through. Like, no, but like that's really, but let me just
very like yeah.
Well, like that's the thing. It's like sometimes
what I'm saying about the hangman, right? What I'm saying, the reason I made that point about the hangman in the joke is that we talked about, you know, the way that this movie ends, and it has this protracted like Christmas scene with the gift and everything. There were rules about how a movie had to end at that time.
Of course, yeah.
It's not like I'm suggesting that Charles Laughton is necessarily like, you know, coming in like with a satirical anti-death penalty take or anything like that. But I do think that you feel the energy in the last 15 minutes of this movie of him coming in and going, the rules for how I have to have this movie end are stupid. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the piss out of this a bit, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this up to have a legitimately cathartic scene that also in a different movie seems insane, which is having the hangman have a mini arc in this movie where he learns to love hanging again. I don't mean that he's like, I don't mean that Laughton's necessarily saying Harry doesn't deserve to die or anything like that, but rather just like, hey, do you guys get the insanity of what I'm being made to do?
Well, it's funny too, because he doesn't have to end it that way. Because he could have ended it with Harry getting shot and the cops showing up and the money flying away. That's why I texted it to you. The last 10 minutes of this movie don't exist. Nobody ever talks about it. You always think about everything beforehand, him killing Shelley Winters, chasing the kids, running into Lillian Gish, all that. You always fucking forget that the second that there's 10 more minutes after he gets shot, and that ending ends on the crime doesn't pay ending.
Nevertheless, I feel like there's one thing before we wind down, I feel like we need to maybe do a little bit of Gish talk.
Sure,
because
of course.
As I texted Tom, I remember her being a bigger part of this movie every time I watch it. Like, it is crazy that she doesn't show up until like the very end. She has a hell of an impact on this.
Like an hour into the movie, that's when she's only there for the last 25 minutes.
Yeah, this movie's a tight 90. She comes in the third act. She is, she's the glass of water in the desert that these kids need, and
literally,
not that the movie needed it, but she is the ray of sunshine this fucking pitch black ass movie needed of this.
But she's also very stern. She's also like a Bible thump. Like she is like a Bible.
But there is a warmth to her. There is a contrast to Harry in that, she may be stern and she may have rules and everything, but she does care about these kids. She's not like beating the kids. She's not, whipping them with rulers or whatever. She's stern. She spank them. Well, I mean, that's the time. Listen, if they were in an Italian community, they'd be getting the wooden spoon. So, or a shoe. That's something that bridges the Italians and the Spanish communities together. We got the shoe. She's stern, but she's nice. She's smart, but she's, she can't, like the fact that she's able to be there for Ruby during the Christmas scene at the end of just like, listen, I get it. You kind of fell for this idiot's charm or whatever, and you were lying to me about going, but like, I get it. I still care about you. Here's a gift and blah, blah, blah. Like, so she's great. I mean, she's just great. And listen, I can never be fucking mad at a character, an old lady pulling a shotgun on someone and being like, get the fuck off my lawn.
And later, that incredible silhouette of her in the rocking chair with the shotgun.
Oh, yeah.
Whistler's
and then she shoots him.
Back in heat. Yeah, it's incredible.
And then she shoots him. She straight up just listen, if you keep coming into this room, I'm going to shoot you. If you leave now, we'll let it go. Leave, never come back. You keep coming, I am going to fucking shoot you. It's like, oh no, you're not gonna shoot me, ma'am. I'm just gonna get these kids and get mom. And then she fucking shoots him, and like Mike says, lets out that Looney Tunes ass yell. Oh!
Well,
And
So
another
fun.
great example of when stage direction meets cinematography, when Ruby comes in with that candle,
Yeah.
and then she's like, "Quit mooning about over that guy," and then like blows the candle, and suddenly he's gone. It's
Yeah.
such a
Yeah.
great effect.
yeah,
Oh yeah.
It's like it's very cool. It's like a
I
really
mean,
great,
it is.
another Orson Wellesian esque Greg Toland merging of like stage direction meets cinematography.
By the time we get to the Gish stuff, it really does. You saying the theatricality. The Gish sequence really does feel like what if a serial killer popped up in Grover's Corners in our town? You know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
just in the
yeah,
background,
yeah.
Young Girls of Rochefort style. There was just a serial killer subplot. But the other thing that's worth noting about Gish is watching her in this movie. It is very easy to tell yourself, that's wonderful that this old silent film actress, she was in Intolerance. She was in The Birth of a
Yeah.
Nation. All of which Laughton was screening as Nitrate Prince, his inspiration for the
she
film.
was in Birth of a Nation.
But she was in, Birth of a Nation, all that stuff. You see her in this, and it's easy to kind of just go like, oh man, thank God she got like one last really great role in 1955. But like people talk about with like when Clint Eastwood won the Oscars for Unforgiven, and like, good on you, buddy, one last ride, and then he just keeps making movies. It is wild to think Lillian Gish makes this in 1955, and you go, good, one last ride for her. She probably kicked it like 5 years later, something like that. She died in 1993.
Yeah, no, she had a big career. She had a long one.
Lillian
Did
Gish.
more movies after this.
You should not be to borrow a particular framing device that our past and future guest Patrick Hotner uses. Lillian Gish could have seen Return of the Jedi. She could have gone and seen Return of the Jedi.
Hey, for all the work she did in the silent era and all that, she could have seen Batman Returns.
Yes,
and see that movie about a weird psychosexual movie about a guy in a rubber suit fighting a man named Max Schreck in a German expressionist city.
Her last movie is like
I bet you liked it,
1983.
too.
She makes a movie in 83 with Betty Davis and Vincent Price.
Hell yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's insane. It's just crazy.
Lillian Gish also makes me think of that joke in Three Amigos when Martin Short goes, and there she was, Dorothy Gish, Lillian's sister.
So as we wind down,
there is just we talk about connections and everything, and like the wide tendrils a lot of movies have, and especially in this movie, I feel like there's one filmmaker that I definitely feel like was one of the guys that saw this movie and definitely took it to heart and used it a lot, and it's not just thematically and storytelling wise, but visually. And it's a guy I've gotten big on in the last few years. Mike, isn't Douglas Sirk such a big fan of this movie?
Here's the interesting thing about that. It's entirely possible that he was, but it's also entirely possible that he never saw it, but that he and Laughton, both in their own weird way, were drawing from the same silent films, right? Because I think that...
Yeah, because they're like contemporaries too,
and I
right?
think that it's very cool that like, whereas Laughton is going, okay, can I do what the silent era did and this style of filmmaking, but with sound and with the much more graphic subject matter we can do? And Sirk comes from the exact same place as you're describing, Tom. He comes from the same place and goes, but what could we do with color? Right? What could I do with
color?
Yeah,
what could we do with Middle America?
It's a little bit
like at this time Douglas Sirk is making his Rock Hudson melodramas like Magnificent Obsession and The Tarnished Angels, which
I just double checked. Those were before this, so I fucked up. That's fine. It's okay.
No, but I do want to because I see what you're saying, Tom, and I agree. I almost think in contrast that Charles Laughton saw Lured, which was like Sirk's noir 10 years before this movie, and with the noir with Boris Karloff and Lucille Ball, which is really good, and it has a lot of very similar beats, and especially the way a lot of characters are playing it. It's a kind of a deviation from his later, like more melodramatic work, but it is really it's a very similar So I want to I support your I want to support your theory, but also like maybe Laughton was more inspired by Cirque.
And at the same time, I would say, to some degree,
that's definitely true. Yeah,
I could see it as a scenario of, I think it's akin to, I already evoked Young Girls of Rochefort, but there is something about like, all of these Cahiers du Cinema guys were going to the same movies, they were watching the same things.
Oh yeah,
but
sure.
but Jean-Pierre Melville is like, what if I did a gangster movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
And meanwhile, you've got Jacques Demy going, what if we did a Technicolor musical? And they're both drawing from the same things, and they're both doing similar things and going in different directions. And, Tom, like you said, with the Cirque to Laughton comparison, like, both of them are drawing from the same well of silent film. And again, attributing it to D.W. Griffith, nowadays with modern film scholarship, we know, like, a lot of the things that we point to D.W. Griffith and say, he invented that. No, he didn't. Other people did, and he just did it too, and then said he invented it. But at the time,
he got popular for it.
Yeah, but at the time, these guys didn't know that, right? And then just try. But they're drawing from the same well, and what interesting kind of different directions they go in. Because obviously, Laughton only makes this film. Had he made more, who knows if he would have ever dabbled in color, right? I think in his mind, black and white is part of it, and obviously, Cirque makes the definitive color movies, maybe like the ultimate.
I mean,
color movies?
the best looking movies other than Suspiria.
Also,
they were definitely working in the same things, because even like I feel like thematically, like Stark was doing his melodramas, and this is a weird horror fairy tale thing, but just the small town America stuff is just so like we're kind of taking.
Have you guys ever talked about Leave Her to Heaven on this podcast?
No, I don't know if that's. I feel like that has
Leave Her to Heaven.
That's got to be in the registry, but
that's a color noir directed by John Sturges, and I would say that's a pretty good. That's like it's not a 1-to-1 in terms of like Night of the Hunter and Leave Her to Heaven, but like as far as like that type of German expressionist framing and lighting goes. It's very similar, and that's also I think one of my favorite Technicolor films. It's like
that's a great movie.
As talked about,
I've seen that. Yeah.
It's Gene Tierney pretending to like as a sociopath. She like gets Cornell Wilde to fall in love with her, and then like she slowly like isolates him from everyone else in his life, and it's very like. The Gene Tierney character is a tangential Harry Powell-esque figure.
I mean, I will say this, David. It's I don't want to get too into Leave Her to Heaven because I just looked it up. It is in the registry, and we're going to be talking about it very soon in just 25 seasons from now. So I don't want to overlap. Because
sure, of course, got to give it space.
Yeah, I mean, it's because they're so close to only 25 seasons. And we churn these out fast, so it'll be, we will be Lillian Gish's age by the time we get to that one.
Oh God, I hope not.
So as we wind down, as we always do, I am about to. Well, you know what? Let's see how Tom does with this one. Tom, as we always do, how do you think the Night of the Hunter did at the Academy Awards that year? For the listeners, Tom drew 0. There we go. Tom, you are correct. The Night of the Hunter was not nominated for any Oscars. The Best Picture nominees that year, it's actually kind of interesting because you do get some of these films that touch on some of the sexual elements the way we were talking about. Love is a Many Splendored Thing, Mr. Roberts, Picnic, The Rose Tattoo, and the winner, Marty. So I think it's very interesting to contrast those in terms of like, we're obviously talking about Night of the Hunter, why it was rejected and saying it was so stylized, right? And the winner for Best Picture that year is arguably the most neo-realist movie in mainstream American cinema of the time. A movie that is just... no frills, no nothing, and another movie that is 90 minutes. I'm going to get you in, I'm going to get you out, We will be covering Marty much sooner on this show. I think that's in like season 5 or season 6. And I'm really excited because, David, you've done this show for 4 years now. Though you've never met Tom in person, you've got a good sense of his vibe. David, Tom has to date not seen Marty. How much of a good time is this guy in particular in for with Ernest Borgnine's Sad Butcher Man? You know what I'm saying? Like, it feels like...
Yeah, no, I feel like it's... Yeah, Marty's an interesting movie. It's like... it is very neorealist. It's very, like... It's just a guy.
Yeah.
It's no frills. You said it absolutely right. There's no frills to it. It's just a guy that lives with his mom and is dating a nice lady.
My friends think this dame is ugly. There it is. There's the log line of the movie. There is no more to it.
It's really like what if Rocky wasn't a boxer?
Yeah.
Like what if it was just a guy? Like yeah.
And I think
what if there's...
We'll get into it when we talk about Marty, but one of the things that's fascinating in this little theory I work with sometimes is like when you look at the American films that win the Palme d'Or, at least in the 20th century, right? Whether it's Lost Weekend, Marty, Friendly Persuasion, it is interesting because it almost feels like those are the movies where you see the European audience at Cannes go, oh, the Americans have stepped up their game. Good job. You know, there's something about like with Lost Weekend, Marty, where you just seem like, oh, good, you've grown up a little bit. Good job. And Marty is like a quintessential example of that. Is it's just like, again, there's no melodrama to it, nothing. So it's interesting that to look at Night of the Hunter in the lens of Marty has just won the Palme d'Or and Best Picture. You know,
especially because like that's also like I was surprised that On the Waterfront wasn't on the Best Picture list that year too, because that's also
it wins Best Picture, but I think it's like the year after or the year before.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, On the Waterfront.
I'm thinking of like movies from around that time too, of just you know, mid-50s was like, you know, a lot of cultural touchstones. It was, you know, you have McCarthyism. There's like a lot of the 50s in general was seen as, you know, the boomer generation, a lot of American prosperity happens in that decade, and it's also a time when we're you know, a lot of countercultural milestones were invented in that time that still exist today. It's a very important, you know, questioning of America time.
Yeah.
And the thing that wins Best Picture is just about a guy who's like just dating a very lovely lady who's like lives with his mom. Really zero melodrama. No. It's just straight up kitchen sink real drama.
Well, and it's because all of this,
right?
Yes. Yeah. Right. So
So it's just it's literally just is Marty in the Bronx or is he?
I forget exactly where he is. I know he's a butcher.
I forget. But I think he's a guy in the Bronx. But yeah, it's about a guy in the Bronx who just like is living life. It's like Ikiru if he never dies.
Yes, absolutely. So with that, David, thank you so much for joining us yet again. This is very cool that we always do this. You know,
thank you so much for having me again.
Feel free in these final moments, plug away. Let us know what are you working on, or do you have anything you want people to check out, or anything anything before, anything after, anything like that. What do you want people looking at?
I have a newsletter. If you guys are a fan of Substack, you can find me on at There Will Be Bluvband on Substack, where I post movie reviews and short stories of fiction. And yeah, if you live in New York and get ready for UCB to open back up again this summer, and you might catch me on Maud Night, which is their sketch comedy night. Every month there.
This is I did not know that was happening. This is the first time hearing that. You broke some news to me.
It's opening this summer. So that should it will be in the dawn of a new era. It'll be interesting to see what happens.
Do you know where it's going to be, or I don't know.
It'll be on 14th Street between 1st Avenue and 2nd Avenue.
Oh, okay.
Where the old Crunch Gym used to be.
And all the equipment will still be in there. You guys have to incorporate it, right? It's like prop work.
You can get a couple of laps in, just put some bench press sets, and lat pull downs while you're watching sketch comedy.
All right, so I need a location, an occupation, and how much weight I should put on this bar. Everybody, who's got one? Great. Great.
Oh yeah, put it that'll go well.
Well, David, thank you so much for joining us. We will see you. We will have you on again soon. But everybody else, stick around. We'll be right back with our picks for the National Film Registry.
The National Film Registry isn't some fixed object, frozen in time. It's always growing, adding new titles every year. These annual selections are made by the National Film Preservation Board, with members like Martin Scorsese, Alfre Woodard, and Leonard Maltin, and representatives from organizations like the Academy, the DGA, and the AFI coming together to debate and decide. But they don't just pull titles out of thin air. They pull from the public, people like you and us, who can submit their nominations for the registry in a form on the Library of Congress's website. What we do, at the end of each episode, is have Mike and Tom pick films not yet in the registry that they feel should be, inspired by that day's topic. At the end of each season, those films will be formally submitted to the National Film Registry for consideration, on behalf of You're Missing Out. Here are today's picks.
Okay, so my pick for this one was pretty easy. We talked a lot in this episode about a lot of the tendrils that this movie left in the history of cinema, all the ways it affected everything that came after it. But there's one movie I didn't talk about because I was kind of saving it for this, and it hit me like a lightning bolt the way I described something in the episode. I already forgot what I said in the episode, but it just hit me. A horror movie directed by an actor about the effects of religion and blind faith upon a family, young children especially. It's one of the best horror movies of the last, at this point I have to qualify it as 30 years, because I think it's 26 years old at this point. Maybe it's a little, I don't know, but of the last 30 years, unheralded, underrated, great movie, directorial debut by one of my guys, one of the boys. I miss him dearly every day. My pick for the registry is Frailty, the horror movie directed by Bill Paxton. I think that movie is a straight up horror masterpiece, and I think if you put this and Night of the Hunter in a double feature, you would be absolutely thrilled and horrified with the results. Absolutely upset about the very concept of organized religion. I scared about the very concept of a god, because as the twisted Frailty reveals, no, all this shit is happening. God is a part of this, and it's kind of fucked up, isn't it, huh, guys? And yeah, directorial debut by an actor. Bill Paxton made his debut on Frailty, and he fucking knocked it out of the park. It's scary, it's emotional, may not have the same visual panache as Night of the Hunter, but I mean, bro, I'm not going to be mad that a baseball player isn't Mickey Mantle, even fucking Roger Maris was pretty good, but he wasn't Mickey Mantle, I think Frailty's fucking amazing. I would love it to get more attention. I know it has a Blu-ray, but it might be out of print at this point. It's one of those movies that I would love for a Criterion to kind of rescue and kind of push back into the consciousness, especially as just like a tribute to Paxton, who we lost a while ago at this point now. Yeah, I love that movie, and I think it's a perfect pairing with Night of the Hunter. If you haven't seen Frailty, check that shit out, man. It is something to behold.
So my pick is also, a horror film. But in my case, I was thinking in a different direction. One of the things we talked about in the episode and the discussion was being able to draw this line from Night of the Hunter to Psycho, Peeping Tom, slasher films, right? But this isn't just a slasher horror. This is, as we said, Southern Gothic. This is a horror movie of a particular place in a particular time, right? And the Depression, we're seeing a man as a preacher, in a preacher's garb, preying upon people, right? Partly because this place, this town, this whole area is so broken. There's something creepy about the South. That's something that Tennessee Williams taps into. That's something that Flannery O'Connor and William Faulkner tap into. In a Depression story made in the 1950s, that is, of course, cloaked in religion. But you skip ahead, give or take 30 years. Religion's still a factor, but the larger thing impacting the people at this time isn't the Depression, it's the Vietnam War that hangs over this. There is a film, a hugely influential film, a scrappy indie film that absolutely revolutionizes the genre and also contributes to the lineage of the slasher film, but is a Southern horror film. You don't think of it as a slasher film, it's a Southern horror film. Tom is nodding because he knows where this is going, because we very recently had a discussion about how weird it is that this movie is not in the registry already. One of the most influential films of all time, and very much in line with the creepy vibes of Night of the Hunter, even if its visual style is the exact opposite direction. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre not already being in the National Film Registry this far out is crazy. Enough that every time I think about it, I double check. I go back in and I check just to be sure. But in the lineage of Southern horror, right? If you're drawing that line of Night of the Hunter into, say, Deliverance, into Texas Chainsaw Massacre, there's also that lineage. And I think Texas Chainsaw Massacre is absolutely one of the most influential films of all time. And, you know, I'm sure I'm not there are so many people with hot takes out there. I'm sure I'm not the first person to draw parallels between Texas Chainsaw Massacre and William Faulkner, but you can draw them if you want to draw them. Texas Chainsaw Massacre is as American as William Faulkner, is as American as apple pie, is a fundamental part of our culture and our cultural anxieties about a region of this country. So I think Texas Chainsaw Massacre absolutely deserves a place in the National Film Registry.
Next week,
Robert Bellissimo joins us on the show again to talk about Letter from an Unknown Woman.
And it's interesting that a guy who is such a player, who clearly slept with so many women that he didn't even remember this woman, didn't even see that she could potentially have been the love of his life. Obviously, he was the love of her life.
You're Missing Out is a production of Neon Night Media. It's hosted by Mike Natale and Tom Lorenzo. The show is produced by Kaya Lampar and edited by Mike Natale and Kaya Lampar. More information about our hosts and guests are in the show notes. Thank you to Amanda Rush for our social media, and all of you for checking us out.
If you're listening right now or want to take the show on the go, every episode is available as an audio podcast. Follow You're Missing Out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you like what you hear, please leave a review and a rating. It helps folks find the show.
Want to watch the show or watch some of the films along with us? Great, that's why we're doing this. Don't leave us alone out here. Check out our YouTube channel. We've got video versions of every episode, uploads of some of the National Film Registry titles we're discussing, commentary tracks, and live streams. And once a month, I'll be uploading some content that's exclusive to the YouTube channel. So be sure to click subscribe and hit that little bell to be notified as soon as new stuff goes up. Because, let's be fucking real, I ain't sticking to a goddamn schedule.
So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
And we'll see you next time.
And you'll see us next time, because we don't watch you, you're watching us.